Hello and welcome back to the Frontington and Backwoods Railway. In my previous video I lifted my eyes to the skies. In this video we're back on track with some ballast. It's time. The track has proven reliable, it's all glued down and nothing derails. So today is the day I put ballast down. This ballast was recovered from my previous layout, which itself used leftover ballast from the layout I had back in the 80s, so I have no idea what brand this started out as. In any case, it's been washed and sieved and dried, ready to be put onto this layout. And because it's been a while since I last laid any ballast, I'm taking things slow and steady at first. Carefully does it. Especially around the points. This brush seems to work nicely. It packs the ballast between the sleepers and spreads everything out evenly. There were a couple of spots that needed some extra ballast. And this is why we buy Oxford die-cast models. The lids are just so useful. Once it's all roughly in the right place, I can go in with a smaller brush and do some fine-tuning. Again, I started off very cautiously to begin with, as I worked out what I was doing. It's just a case of repositioning anything that looks out of place. Ballast wouldn't normally settle on top of the sleepers. I actually found it quite a relaxing process. Not nearly as stressful as some would have you believe. Unless I've missed something important. Have I missed something important? I don't think I have, but let me know in the comments if you can predict a troubled future for me. With each stone in its place, the glue came next. As you might expect, this is a 50-50 mix of water and PVA glue, with a couple of drops of washing up liquid to break the surface tension. Some people use pipettes for this, but I find this old glue bottle works really nicely. It holds plenty at a time, it's precise, it's controllable, and it means I don't have to keep refilling. And then it's just a case of rinse and repeat for the rest of the track too, which probably doesn't need much in the way of narration other than to say that I sped up considerably once I got into it. You may have wondered why I don't have any underlay beneath my tracks. Many people put down cork or foam, in some cases to reduce noise, in some cases to allow them to model a ballast shoulder, where the ballast slopes down away from the track bed. Since the focus of my layout is the station, I'm not expecting lots of fast-moving trains, so sound deadening isn't really needed. And from the pictures I could find, ballast shoulders are really only a thing on main running lines, not around stations. So it seemed redundant to add underlay if it wasn't going to help. Arguably I could have used it on the line out of the station, but that's mostly behind the hill and won't be seen much, so it hardly seemed worth the effort. There was only one minor hiccup in my ballasting. The track had previously been glued down with PVA, which seemed like a perfectly good idea at the time. But when I put down the ballast and flooded the area with watered down PVA glue, the glue holding the track down reactivated in a couple of places, and the track popped up. Unfortunately, my camera was horrified by this error and stopped recording, so that's all you're going to see of it. Easy enough to fix by weighing it back down while it dried, but certainly something to watch out for in future. I ended up having just enough of this ancient ballast to cover the entire station area and a little of the branch line track at the end of the layout. After that, I used some ballast I'd bought from World War Scenics. It needed a fair bit of sieving first, as despite being labelled as fine, there were some massive chunks in it. It was also quite dusty, but thankfully that disappeared once the glue was applied. Incidentally, I ran out of my normal PVA glue at this point and had to use some other brand, which was clear rather than white. Although that didn't seem to make any difference to the way it worked, it just made it slightly harder to see what I'd glued already. This ballast was also quite a bit lighter in colour, so once the glue dried I gave it a quick wash with some watered down black and brown acrylic paints. Subtle, but it made a difference. While I was at it, I also added some darker staining to other areas of the track where engines would linger. It's not perfect yet, but it's a start. There was one more section of track I needed to sort out though. I had previously laid and painted sand around the goods yard, and I needed to carry that on for the rest of the track work behind the station, including the points and the engine shed siding. The reason for using sand is that traditional ballast was often only used on the actual running lines of a railway, particularly out in the countryside, and sidings had to make do with whatever leftover material there was. In many cases, this would have been cinders and ashes, which I'm modelling with this fine sand. It does look odd initially, because it's sand-coloured, but once painted it looks pretty good. The paint does soak into the sand quite a lot though, even when it's glued down, so it took quite a bit of paint to cover it adequately, which also left the sand rather soggy, but it dried rock hard after a day or two. Now, painted sand on its own isn't quite enough though, so I got out my weathering powders and rubbed it into the bay platform siding, adding brown and black. The dust really got in between the grains of sand and made a really convincing effect, so I'll be applying that to the rest of the track too. So there we have it, all the track nicely ballasted. And the trains don't fall off. And the points still work. So I'd class that as a resounding success. That said, if you'd have done it differently, do give a shout in the comments. After all, we're all learning here, and even if it's too late for me, it might help someone else. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, as there will be another video out soon where I'll finally be adding some much needed greenery to the layout. But that's all for this video though. Bye for now.